Okay, so we're going to get started with instancing. We're going to need a couple things from Photoshop, so I'm going to go to File, New in Photoshop, and I'm going to create a new document, and it's going to be in pixels. Make sure we're on RGB coloring. Make sure we close the welcome screen. And we're just going to make it 256 by 256. This can always be changed later. Right now we're just creating the stand-in pieces, so that'll be sufficient. Make sure it's 256 pixels by 256 pixels. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the text tool and just drag a box, and I'm just going to number these 1 through 5. Okay, so I'm coloring it black, changing the font so that it's bigger. There we go. And I'm just going to save this as. Now I want to put it into my folder on the D drive. Okay. So I need to go and make my project folder. So I'm just going to jump over to Maya, go to my project window, new folder, and I'm going to call this Instancing Sarcona. Okay. So now on the here and here and here, there's my instancing Sarcona. Source images, and this will be called number 1, and we'll call this an if. Okay. Now I actually want to have some sort of numbering system here, so I'm going to leave this as 1.if. And once we get into Maya, we'll see if this recognizes it. And if not, we'll have to come back and change some things, but for now that'll be fine. So save, Maya, okay. Okay, so that's number 1. So now I'm going to take this and make it 2. And I'm going to save it as an if number 2. And I think you can see where I'm going with this. 3, 4, and finally 5. Okay, and then I'll save the PSD document as just numbers. And that way I have my layers and I can come back to this. Okay, so that's all we need. Here are these 5 images from right there. Okay, now inside Maya we're going to need another item here too. We're going to need a cone, like so. Okay, and the reason we're using a cone is because it's a great way to kind of start off and get the positioning and angles and all this other stuff correct first, and then we can adjust it from there. Okay, I am going to modify this a little bit. I'm just going to grab one of these edges here. Let's see, I'll just grab this edge, and I have mirroring on. You can see it's grabbing the other side, so I'm just going to go and turn mirroring off. So I'm just going to grab this edge and just pull it out. Okay. And eventually these are going to be replaced with some sort of spaceship, so I just want to make sure that I have, this is the top of the spaceship, this is the front, and that's the back. Okay. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to use under the Dynamics menu, we're going to go under Particles here. Alright, so we're going to take this and we're going to go under Particles. We're going to go to Create Emitter. Okay, and you can use any kind of emitter here, but the best one is the volume one. Okay, so you should use volume for this specific thing, but it does work with these other ones for other reasons, for other instances. For now, I'm going to keep the rate kind of low at 5. My distance and direction, all these other attributes we'll set afterwards. Okay, so what I have now is I just have this emitter and I'm just pulling it off to the side. I'm going to scale it up some, and if you look at the direction, they're all coming out in every direction. I don't want that, so I'm going to scroll down here to where it says away from center and away from axis. I'm going to turn those off, and I just want it to go along axis, and I'll set it to 5. Okay, it's a good starting value. And I'm just going to give it some angle like that. Okay, so now this is, I want these guys to fly out of here. Okay, if I hit play, Oops, and I make sure my right-click playback speed it is on play every frame. Okay, just making sure. And I hit play. You can see the particles coming out of here. Okay, give myself a little bit more room. All right, maybe they're coming a little slow, so let me grab the emitter, and where I changed it to 5, let me change it to 12. There you go. Now they're a bit quicker coming out of that. Okay, so that's cool there. So now let's say I want to take this guy here, and I want to have him be these little particles flying out of there. Now if you had the animation class, when we've done this, that's the same principle. We're just going to be applying it a little bit different. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to grab my particles. Go to Particles, go to Instancer Option Box, and then here we go. I'm going to leave everything as the default for right now. I am going to go in here with the instance objects, and where it says Cone 1, Particle 1, I'm just going to remove Particle 1. Okay, and then hit Create. And now you'll see as I hit play that the cones are now coming out of this thing. Okay, so I can use this as, you know, spaceships or anything really, rockets, arrows, anything where I need just a massive amount of items flying out of this. I've even seen this used for crowd simulation. Okay, so now we have to adjust it, obviously, because all the cones are basically pointing straight up and down. There's no gravity in the scene, so of course they're not falling at all, which, you know, if this was space, they would have gravity, but if we wanted arrows or something to fall, we would have gravity on there. It's also kind of good practice just to be able to set it up correctly so that they're flowing in the path that they're moving, and adding gravity helps us kind of simulate that. So I'm just going to grab the particles here, and under fields, just go to gravity. Okay, these are not end particles, these are just regular particles, so they don't have regular gravity automatically applied. So now I hit play, and you'll see they come out and they just kind of flop down. Okay, so let me grab this, and I'm just going to take that along axis to maybe 33. There we go. So now we have the more projecting out of there. Okay, once I'm done and I have the setup there, I can delete the gravity or reduce the gravity or change it to something else. But I just like to have it set up so I can see what's happening. Also, my cone looks a little bit too symmetrical all the way around, so I'm just going to scale it up vertically. That way I can definitely see which way it should be facing. Okay. So now obviously these points should be facing the direction that they're moving. The tops of this are in a good spot. They're just not at the top of it. Okay. So what I have to do is reorient this guy. Okay. Now the way that he works is if I switch my grid on, turn it on in all the 17 spots. If I switch my grid on, the positive X direction of my grid, which is facing this left side, is the front of any instance object. Okay, so if I want this to be the front, then I need to rotate this like that, so it's facing the front. And then I need to go under Modify, and I need to freeze my transforms. Okay, oops. Make sure that Rotate is also on that list. There we go. Okay, so now you'll see that they are facing front ways. Okay, now they're still not angling the correct direction that I want them to angle, so that's no big deal either. We just go into the particles, go to the attribute editor, and under particle shape, there's an instancer tab right there. There we go. And rotation, aim direction, these are all different things that you can use to program the movement of this. So what I can do is I can say rotation is set to velocity. Okay, sorry, not rotation. Aim direction is set to velocity. That way it's aiming in the direction it's moving. And you'll see now that they're all flying in the correct, appropriate direction. If I took this and just for the point of this exercise, I'm just going to do this kind of animation to it via an expression. Okay, so looking at the rotate X, that's what's rotating. So I'm just going to click there, edit, expression, and say rotate X. equals the sine of time, times 10, and then I'm going to multiply that answer times 50. Okay, so what should happen is I should get an arc that goes from here to negative 50, positive 50, negative 50, positive 50, back and forth. Okay, and it's going pretty quick. Let me just slow that down. That times 10 is probably a little bit too aggressive. Let's do it times 2. Okay, so now you can see all these things kind of flying out in every direction, and they're all facing the correct direction that they're facing. So they're facing this way, so they point that way. Perfect. And if I look at where the tops are, where I set up the little top area, I can see that that is also lined up with where I needed that to be lined up with. Okay. Now we've done this with a single object, and the single object is right here, and we can modify this, and I can still tweak it and do whatever I want. Like I said, I like to kind of get this set up first. Let's just grab the points back here instead of that. I'm not going to spend too much time just kind of tweaking this. I just want to have a better representation of where that is. So it's easier to see from back here. So I like to make sure it's kind of set up down there. Make sure this is working correctly. Everything seems to be working fine with this. Okay. And then once I'm done, all I have to do is replace this guy with something else. Okay, so if I decided I wanted a sphere, then I would just have to grab the sphere, go to my instancer, and I would just say add that sphere into that selection, and then I could just move the cone down. And so now you'll see that we just have spheres flying out. Okay, the cone is still on the list, and we'll get to that where we can add multiple items to that. But now I can cycle between these two different objects the way it's currently set up. All right. So I'm going to take the sphere out, remove items. There we go. I took the wrong one out. Take the sphere out, remove items. There we go. Okay. All right. So there is our little spaceships coming out here. Now I want to, because this is, you know, a dynamics project, I want to add something to this. So I want to add a little smoke stream coming out the back of this. Okay, let me delete this sphere. Let me save this. I'm going to just call this instancing 001. Okay, so now that we have that there we go. I'm going to add a little smoke stream coming out of the back of the ship. Okay. And the way I do that is that we have particles in here. Okay, each one of these guys is represented by this little particle at the center. Okay, the particle gets emitted, and then these little guys here are what are basically what's figuring out the movement and then putting it there. So if I take this particle here and I go up to particles and I say emit from object. This one's going to be an omni, and I'll set this to smoke trail, and the speed is 1. That's fine. I'll probably actually lower it to 0.25 with a little bit of random, and then create. Okay, so what's going to happen now is as I rewind this and I hit play, you'll see that now there's this little particle trail happening. Okay, now my emitter for this is only set to 5. I need this one up to probably about 100, maybe more, maybe less. Okay, probably more. There we go. Okay, so now you can see the little smoke trail coming out of there. Right, and I'm just kind of like puffing it, which is kind of weird. Let me just verify that my settings aren't crazy when they're not. I may need to take the speed up a little bit. When I go frame by frame, it seems to be doing perfect. Let me go to my playback speed and just say play every frame. Just to verify that it is actually playing every frame. Right? I guess that'll just be a fun thing to look into, why it's doing that. That's weird. Let me try setting this to directional and just see if I get anything different. Yep, same thing, little Morse code type things. Alright, so ignoring that little feature of it, you can see that we're getting some sort of trail coming out of here, which is what we want. But it doesn't really look like smoke or anything, so we're going to adjust that so that it does look like smoke. So I'm going to grab the particles that are back here, okay, and I'm going to call these ones smoke trail underscore particles. And I'm going to go back, so now we're getting more particles in here, and these are rocket instances, and I'll put the underscore particles at the end. And then this test 2, that is my rocket emitter, and this instancer is my rocket instancer. And underneath this, when we did the emit from object, that's where the other emitter went. So for every particle we have an emitter, so I have to make sure I label that, which it already is smoke trail 2. I'm just going to do an underscore emitter so I know it's an emitter. Okay, so I have my cone, which is my spaceship, my rocket emitter, which is this little cube back here, my rocket instance particles, which are the particles that are shooting out of that rocket emitter, and then those are being replaced by this cone. I have my smoke trail, which are these little white ones. I have my rocket instances, I have my gravity field, and I have my smoke trail particles, which are the actual smoke trail. Okay, so now let's go into the attribute editor and tweak some of these settings. So for the smoke trail particles, I'm going to come down to render attributes, and in here I'm going to set this to cloud. And what cloud is going to do, if I hit the render button, is it's going to create this blue cloud-like structure. Okay, so obviously it doesn't look very realistic. We're going to change that. So I'm going to go under the current render type for it, and here I can play with the size. Okay, I can also play with the surface shading and the threshold of how they're blending together. Okay, now these are just basic like overall settings. All right, I don't want to use these as overall settings. I want to actually adjust these per particle. So if I come down here to my per particle array attribute, I'm going to hit general, and under particle I can scroll down to where it says radius pp, and I'm going to hit OK. The pp means per particle. So now I'm going to create an expression here that's going to link it to this radius. Okay, so I'm going to right click on radius pp. I'm going to create an expression, and if I just select this and middle drag it down here, I can say that at creation, at the birth of each particle, they're getting a radius of a random number between, let's say, 0.5 and 2. Okay, so just so you can see what this looks like, we'll go to WordPad, we'll paste it in there. I'll make sure I have a big enough font so you can see it. There we go. So smoke trail, da 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 da, equals, and this is the magic part, rand 0.5 comma 2. Okay. So now when I hit create, and I close everything and reset it, and hit play, you can then see that I'm getting particles coming out of here. And if we look close at them, okay, you'll see that this thing has stopped working. Some of these particles are at 0.2, you see the smaller ones, and then you can see the bigger ones. Okay, so it's probably still too big, so I'm going to right click, go back to that creation expression, and just set this number down. So maybe 0.2 and 1. So edit, close, close, and then rewind it and play it again. Okay, and so now we're getting, if we look at the back of this, we'll be able to see it better because it's spread out more. But now we're getting a difference in size right there that's a little bit more appropriate to what they would be doing. Okay, and again, they're still doing that puff thing. Let me check my animation settings here and just make sure I'm on play every frame. Yes. 24 degrees, yes. And it could even be this renderer. If I switch it back to default, yeah, by switching it back to default from viewport, that fixed it. Okay, it's just an odd thing that it did it, but whatever. Just roll with the punches. Okay. Now we're also noticing that the smoke is actually coming out of the center of the ship and not the back of the ship. Okay, and that has to do with this guy here. Okay, he is. Let me switch views. You see my black grid lines going here and here. It's using this center point as where it's coming from, not the back. So if I hit D and I slide the pivot back here to the back of the ship, and then I scoot this forward to about there, and then I freeze my transforms again, we'll see that now the spaceships are coming from, or the particle for the spaceship is now at the back of it. Okay, and then that's where the smoke is now coming out of. So now it looks obviously a bit more realistic. All right, I am getting an error down here. Let me just see what this is. Nothing important right now. Okay. All right, so now we have this emissions state right now. So that's cool. Cloud. Okay. If I go through and I just do a little rendering of it, I can see that they're all pretty much, solid blue. It's going to need some shading work to get it to look more like clouds. I can adjust the surface shading, and you'll see once I turn this up to 1, the settings, I believe for that one, are pretty drastic. Yeah, there you go. So surface shading makes it actually look like a surface, where down to 0, we are getting more of like a volumetric rendering. Okay, and then this threshold, we're not really going to see too much with this. It may blend it in more, but you can see there's not a huge difference just because there's nothing. It's all like solid color right now, so we'll just ignore that for now. We can go through and adjust the shader. Okay, now just like your default objects get a default Lambert, your particles get a default material too, and that's called particle cloud. Okay, so I'm going to go and make a new material, and under Maya, there it is, not my favorites, just regular Maya. There is a particle cloud somewhere in here. There it is. And you'll see that they turn green. That's not the color they're going to render. They're still getting the default blue. And here's where the power comes in, is that we have life color, life transparency, and life incandescence. Okay, so if I go to life color and click that, and I can go to ramp. All right, and so what that's going to do is I have to click back on it sometimes and then go back to the ramp. Here it is. The start of them is going to be this color. The end of them is going to be that color. So if we rewind it and play, and then I render this, you'll see that we should have something happening here. It looks like it's gone. Now, they are there. If I go to my alpha channel, there we go. We can see that they're there. Okay. Now it's getting solid black. Okay. So remember I said this is based on the start of their life, and this is based on the end of their life. Well, right now these particles are never dying. They're just constantly alive, constantly flying through the air. Okay, so I have to give them a lifespan so that they eventually die off. So if I click on them, go to my smoke trail, go up to where it says lifespan, it's set to live forever. So I'm going to say random range. We'll set it to 1 and a randomness of 0.5. Okay, so now you can see that they are dying off. So now if we were to render this, we would see black going into white. Okay, not a very good smoke trail. So let's go back to that color, and we can just pick something here. So if this is a smoke trail up here, remembering back to when we did fluid effects, we can make this more of like a bright yellowy orangey color. Drop a little bit of red in there. It might be able to even fit in a little bit of white into the mix. Sliding these around a little bit. There we go. And then back here, that's where I want them to be more of like that dark smoky color. And then way in the back, maybe that's where it's black. Okay, so now we render it, and you can see what we're getting here. Now I could, the icon is messed up for this. Yeah, it's messed up still. Now I could add a little bit of noise in here, and that will kind of vary that a little bit. But what else I can do is just rewind this and play it again. And sometimes just doing that will kind of help vary it some. Okay, you can see in this guy it's varied a little bit more. All right, I just need to adjust the lifespan randomness so that some of the particles are dying right away. Okay, so I go back to here, go back to the lifespan. I'll set their randomness to 1. Rewind it, play it again. And we can see kind of how it's doing it a little bit more. We still need to adjust these some. Okay, I'm not really liking how they're coming out. I'm not really liking how they're staying the same radius. Okay, so let's adjust all those properties while we're here. So let's come down to where we see that radius. And right now, like we said before, the radius is just like a solid number. It's just locked into that. If we right click and we go to create runtime expression, then I can say the radius pp equals the radius pp times 0.98. Okay. Now what that should do is it should take the radius and multiply it times 0.98 every single frame. All right. So, and this is just that there. Okay. So every single frame it should get 98% bigger. Alright, so now we'll rewind it and play it again. And you can see that they are gradually getting smaller. Okay. Now it looks like we might be like disconnected a little bit here. Check the alpha. Now it is there. It's just picking up some of the black. Sometimes when you create a ramp, back here, and then we added a little bit of noise, that black from this side creeps over to the other side. There we go. So now we can see that. Okay. Now I could also go into this and add maybe a little bit of noise. Okay. Instead of this being just like solid white, I can click on the selected color and go down to, let's say, crater. And here I could say one color is white, one color is orange, one color is red. Go back, remove these colors, hold that up a little bit, render it again. And now you'll see that I have a mix of colors inside that I could then just go to the crater and just start playing with some of these settings to get different results. Okay, that's obviously too much. Maybe I will adjust the balance of this a little bit more, or play with the colors to adjust them. Adjust the frequency. I can pull up some more of their red. There we go. So we have something happening there. We could also, if we wanted to, we could create a big emitter or a big container out here and use fluid effects as our emitter. Okay, so just so you can see that, I can create a 3D container, not scaled up like that, but scaled up like we did in class. Okay, and obviously you want to contain it to the area you're in, and then it would just be a matter of grabbing the container, shift-clicking those original particles there, and saying under fluid effects, emit from object, and then that would be our emitter. Okay, I'm not going to do it for this one just because I don't want to kill it. Okay, So for now, I'm just going to leave it with that thing in there. Keep in mind, fluid effects was meant to do this kind of smoke trail thing. Okay, because we have so many things happening, we're just keeping it kind of low rent, low resources. You can see how quickly this is playing, how quickly it's rendering. Where fluid effects obviously would take a bit more time to do that kind of thing. All right, so I'm also going to come down here to life transparency and click that, and add a ramp to that as well. Okay, let me go back to this, go back to that. And the start of it is black, meaning it's transparent. Over here it's white, so it's opaque. So I'm going to swap these and then hit play. And then when we hit render, we'll see that we have opaqueness here and transparency there. If I go to my alpha, you can kind of see that happening. And let's just verify. Sometimes in Maya they actually swap how these work. There we go. That's perfect. So in this case, it was wanting to be swapped. In the last version, maybe it was 2013, it wanted to be the white here and the black there. So no big deal. We just swap them, and now we have the opaque on this side, transparency on that side. Okay. And again, we could add a little bit of noise in here, so we're not getting, you know, perfect amounts. There we go. So now we have some transparency kind of throughout it, like that. Okay. All right. And remember, this is all kind of like stand-in just to get it set up, and then we can adjust it. All right, now these guys here, the rockets are going to live forever, okay? And I really don't want them to live forever. What I want to happen is eventually they're going to hit something and explode, all right? So I'm going to create an object here. Let's say we have a planet. And I'm going to edit this rotational value. Set that to 20. So I'm basically just getting these kind of like lined up so that they fire at this thing. Still too much. Let's go to 10. There we go. I'll give it a little bit more launch at it. A long axis, 55. Oops, we're going to overshoot it. 44. There's also some other stuff here. Random direction I can adjust. Directional speed. I can adjust that too. There we go. And now they're kind of all going right at the planet, which is what I want to happen. Okay. So what I want to happen is that the planet is the end of it. Okay. I'll make it even bigger so it looks like an actual-ish planet. Okay, so, and those are still huge. You know, the planet would actually be like that big and whatever. Something like that. Okay, so I want this to be the end of it. So I'm going to grab those guys. I'm going to go to control click on my particles here, my rocket instances. And I'm going to say particles make collide. Now, usually what happens is I get the order wrong. We'll see. I did. So we're going to grab the particles first, control-click the sphere, and then say collide. There we go. And what's going to happen now is probably something comical. Add more frames, 444. Boing, boing, boing. See, it's repelling them. Okay. Right now, the sphere, if I come over here, we have a new geoconnector node. And its resilience is set to 1. Resilience is bounciness, so it's going to bounce. Okay, I'm actually going to leave it at 1 for now. What I want to do is, now that there's a connection, there's an event happening where this thing is colliding, I want to tell Maya what to do when something like that happens. When there's a collision on here, I want to say, hey, when you collide, do this thing. Okay, so I'm going to go to Particles and go to Particle Collision Event Editor. And inside here, I need to pick on a particle. So the rocket instances are the ones I'm going to play with. and I'm going to make a new event after I set some stuff up. So I'm going to say on all collisions, so anytime you're colliding, I want you to emit, let's say 100 particles, and I want the original particle to die. Create. Okay, so now we have a new event. If I close, if I go to my outliner now, you'll see that I have a new particle here. And if I go under this, there's no extra emitter. So we just have random particles, but no emitter. Okay, so these ones are going to be the explosion particles. Alright, so we'll rewind, we'll play, and what should happen now is that these rockets come in and hit the Earth, or whatever planet this is, and then they explode. So you can see that explosion happening. And let's switch my background color so you can see it better. There we go. Okay. Now it is going way too far. It needs to obviously not go that far. So I can just go back to my collision event editor, click on my rocket instance particles. There's the event. I'm just going to turn my inherent velocity up to down to 0.1. And then we'll take a look and see what we're going to get with that. There we go. Much more believable. Okay. So now we can see that there is something happening there. Now we can again stack this on top of that to control more particles coming out of these guys. So I can grab these explosion particles, go to my particles, and say emit from object. And now what's going to happen is these rockets fly into the moon or planet. And now we're getting these extra ones. Now it's only coming out at 5, so I'm just going to put this up to maybe 60 or so. There we go. I'm going to come down here to where we have our speed, and I'll make the speed a bit more. So now we actually have like a full-blown mess of particles kind of exploding when these things hit. Okay, and the cool thing about it is this entire system is just it's a smart system. So if I move my emitter, if I move my planet, if I move any of the other items, it's all going to update. It's all dynamic, right? So I'm going to go to save my scene as. Okay, and what I want to do in this case now is I want to put, instead of these tiny little particles at the tips of this, let me go to my outliner and name some more stuff. So I have this, which is my explosion trails emitter, and this is my explosion trails particle. I want to grab these tips of them and I want to replace it. Instead of it just being like a dot of smoke or whatever it is, I want to have something actually specific there. Okay. Now we're also kind of slowing down. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reset this. I'm going to grab my initial emitter and just set the rate to 1. Okay. That way I have less particles obviously flying out of here. So it's going to be less particles, less work happening. Here's another cool thing. I can just take this emitter and just stretch it out like that. And now we have this huge area that particles are being emitted from. And so we'll have more explosions in different areas that we can play with. Okay, so that looks like a cool explosion right here. Let's go play with this guy. Alright, so the planet, too hard to see what's going on, so I'm just going to assign a default Lambert to it for now and give it a different color like that. There we go. So now we can at least see that explosion happening. Okay. I'm going to go to the event again, and I'm going to go to my rocket instances, and I'm going to take my spread up to maybe 1. Let's see what happens with that. There we go. Now I'm getting more of this rounded shape like that. I like that shape better than the other one I was getting. Okay. So that looks cool. I do want to take these because they're going to eventually just keep going and going and going. You'll see that they just constantly are moving outward. And I want to create their own gravity for this planet. So I'm going to go to my outliner. I'm going to grab my explosion particles. Okay. So those are the particles that are at the very tips of these. If I go to my attribute editor and I change their particle render type to sphere, you can see where those ones are at. Okay, that's just for visual, just so it's easier to see. And then we have the explosion trails, which are these other guys back here. I could make those multi-streak, and you can see those a little bit better. I'll even take the line width up a bit. Okay, so whatever helps you kind of visualize what's happening. I mean, that's makes it easier for you. Maybe I'll just make these. There it is, just regular streak. Yeah, just leave them back to points. Points. There we go. Okay. So we're editing these guys. Okay, so instead of these things here, I want to adjust them so that they're actual pieces of geometry. I also want to have these things kind of pull into this orbit, this gravity of this one. So I'm going to grab those guys, go under fields, and I'm going to add a Newton. Okay, and a Newton is something that pulls towards an object. All right. So if I have the Newton here, I shift click this planet. I'm going to go to particles, fields, and say use selected as source of field. So now this sphere is that field. Okay. So now if we grab our explosion particles and we hit play, reset, so we have to let it play through. Now the Newton is going to do two things. One, it's either going to push them away or it's going to pull it towards that shape. And it looks like we're doing a good job. It's pulling it towards that shape. Okay? And it's actually going to keep pulling it towards the center of it right here. Alright, so obviously you don't want it to pull towards the center of it. Eventually it would die. So I'm going to create another little, basically like a kill field, essentially inside there. But first I'm going to try something else out. I'm going to grab this planet, grab the particles, control click the planet, and go to particles, make collide. Okay, so now these particles are colliding with that. And then let's see what happens. Okay, and that is exactly what I wanted to happen, is that these things just kind of like scatter on the surface of it. Very cool. Okay, and then we can go to the sphere, and here's our geoconnector. We can add a little bit of friction to this if we need to. I am a little bit concerned because it's adjusting the friction of both. I just want to make sure that it doesn't affect it negatively. Conserve and head. I want this. Nope, I didn't want that. Alright, let's just see what happens. There we go. Now I could, if I don't like the way it's kind of like sitting there and bouncing now. Let's have one hit. Take a look at it. And this isn't meant to be like a long shot, you know. We're kind of like looking at this past the point of it being effective. But I wouldn't want to be seeing this explosion while these ones are bouncing around. Okay. So what I'm going to do is window relationships, dynamic relationships, and I have these particles selected. Under collisions, explosion particles. Under collisions, it should have that sphere selected, and it doesn't, which is weird. I should have that selected because that's an emitter too. Whatever. All right, so let's see if that took it off, because that should have removed it from there. Okay, so now it is taken off of that, and it's just, you see that they're still colliding, the rocket's still colliding, and the balls are going through it. No big deal. So now I'm going to take the sphere, and I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to make a new sphere. So this will be my debris sphere. Okay, and my debris sphere is the one that's going to collide with those other particles. That way I can have different settings. So debris sphere, particles, then debris sphere, make collide, good. Then on the debris sphere, I can delete that Newton field. It's not showing the geoconnector. Sometimes you have to go into dynamic relationships, click on the explosion particles, go to collisions, and just make sure that it is colliding with that debris sphere. And then when we come back to this, it should have had it, but it didn't. But it does here. Whatever, Maya. Alright, so I'm going to just take the resilience off and take the friction up. Okay, so now we have two collision spheres. This is our planet. Planet underscore sphere. And then we have our debris sphere. Now the debris sphere wouldn't render, we would just hide that one. Okay, but now you'll see that our items, they kind of hit and then they stick to it a bit. They're not as bouncing as they were before. Or they shouldn't be as bouncing as they were before. Let's just verify. Oh, resilience is still up. Let me take that off, sorry. There we go. So now they're just sticking in place, and that's what we want those guys to happen. Okay. Now these other guys out here, this big puff of smoke, those guys I'm just going to give them a lifespan, so we'll set a random range. That's typically how you do it, just random range. 1 and 1 should be good. We'll make them cloud. We'll go down to their general tab. We'll add a radius PP. We'll make a creation expression. And right now, I don't even know what it's set to. 0.2, I think. One. Okay, so we'll set this random number 0.2 comma 1. There we go. Okay, and then we'll go to the runtime before dynamics and just put radius pp equals random between, it's not random, equals radius pp times 0.75. Okay, so no, it's 75% of that. So it's the same expressions I have here, except in this one I've set this to 0.2, and 1, and then I've set this one to be 75. Okay. So now we rewind, we play. Okay, 75 is way too much. So I'll come back to my expression. Multiply times 0.985. Right. There we go. And then again, we can grab those and add a new material to that. Particle cloud. This is going to be smoky explosion. And again, we can do the same thing where we have this life color, we have our ramp, there we go, explosion trails. And I don't want anyone to be really white. I think mixing in some black and some brown coloring into this is going to be the key to kind of making it look neat. Okay, I'm going to darken all of these. Let's try that and see what that's going to look like. There we go. So now we have some sort of debris happening on there. Okay, now remember, I'm not really close up to it. I can spend more time playing with that, but right now it's just placeholders. Just getting the process set up so that we can tweak it from there. Okay, so far this is great. I'm loving the way this is all happening. This guy here, I can always come back and go to his rate, set this up to an astronomical number like 100, scale it up a bit. Let me save just in case it crashes. Hit play, and you'll see now how we get this basically destruction of particles flying at this thing. I could even turn it off. I can say, you know, frame 50. I'll even go less. I'll just go to frame 23. Set a key, go up a couple frames, set it to 0. So now we have this huge, you know, missile launch right at the planet. And then when it hits, you just see all the bits of debris and stuff right there. Let's take a little rendering of this and see what it looks like. Alright, nothing too fantastic right now, but so far it's looking, you know, sufficient for where we're at. Okay, the last stage is going to be go through and tweak all the stuff and make it look the way we want it to look. Alright, cool. Okay, so that's good. Alright, so now the next bit is I want to replace all of these pieces of geometry, all these spheres with a piece of geometry. Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to show you on Creative Crash. I'm going to type in RockGen Creative Crash. Okay, so this is the script I'm going to use. You download it, copy it into your scripts folder, and then you just type in RockGen with a capital G, and then you can create these boulders. Okay, so I'm going to go and rewind this. I'll grab my emitter. I'm going to just edit my keyframes. I'll just take this down to 5 and then going to 1. And I'm going to create 5 rocks. There we go. There's 5 rocks created right here. I'm going to take all 5 of these rocks. I'm going to hold down X and move them all to this center point. Okay. Then I'm going to go to Particles instancer option box. Here are my 5 boulders. I'm going to put these on my explosion particle shape. Okay. So the particles that hit the ground or that hit here, those spheres that we had, are going to be replaced by these boulders. Now where it says cycle, I'm going to leave this at none. Okay. But what I want to do is randomly pick one of these items. Okay. Pay attention to the numbers here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, and I'm going to hit create. I'm going to hit play, and we'll see these things flying, hits the planet. All right, and we don't really see the rocks there. This one we do, but not that one. Okay. And the reason we don't see them in the right spot is because you see that they're kind of offset. The particles are over here, or sorry, over to the right, and the geometry is there. When I move these back to the origin, I never centered my pivot, okay? Or froze my transforms. So once I freeze it, you can see that it now moves into the correct position. Alright, so now we're all getting the same rock too. It's all exactly the same rock. I don't want the same rock for every single one of these. So I'm going to go to my attribute editor for my explosion particles, and under the explosion particles here, under instancer, there's an object index, okay? And in here I can pick, so I can say age. Based on the age of the particles, I want you to pick a certain one, and what's going to happen is as the particles get older, they'll pick a different thing, and that's not what we want, okay? Because basically they would start off with one and then they would cycle through the rest of them. I don't want that. So I'm going to come down here to my general per particles. I'm going to make a new particle one called object index. I'm going to make it a per particle array. Hit OK. And then I'm going to right click on this and create an expression. So I'm going to take this object index, and I'm going to say that this is going to equal a random number between 0 and 4. Okay. Create, close, and then I'm going to come up here to my object index, and I'm going to link object index. So now I hit play. And what we should see is that we have different rocks inside here. And you can see that happening. I'm going to take my particle render type and put that back to points. Okay. Can see, it's kind of difficult to see because some of them are actually, they're pretty close to the same shape. But we will have to trust me that it is happening. Let me go to the front view. Actually, we can just go back to the original particles. Here, and maybe I'll just make one. I actually want to make all of them a bit smaller. So let me just scale them all down. Then freeze their transforms, and that might give me just the enough that I can see that they're different. Okay, and you can see that some are different sizes and all that, and we haven't set any expressions up for the size of it. All right, so if I go to my current render type here and I change my point size, you see that that doesn't really affect any of that stuff. Alright, so what we have to do is use this item here, the scale, to do that. And we have to do basically the same thing in expression. So we come down here to our general, we go to object scale, do it as a per particle array, right click, creation expression, and then we just add this into the next line after the semicolon. Random between 0.2 and 1, let's say. And then we come up here to our scale, and you'll see that it's not listed inside here. We have to click this box that says allow all data types, and then there's object scale. So now we rewind, we hit play, we wait for the big event to happen, and then you can see that now they have different pieces, different sizes, small ones, big ones. inside there. And we could also go to our aim direction, even our rotation, I believe. Yeah, let's go to our aim direction and set this to velocity. And then the rotation is also set to velocity. It's always good to kind of preview it and make sure it's not doing anything funky. You could try, just playing around with different ones and seeing if you like the ones they're at. So that one's set to position, and it's just giving me just like a basic, rock structure. Some of these will actually, make it go crazy, and it's like flipping around every frame or so. Okay. Eventually I want these emissions to stop emitting. But the camera will be cut by then anyway, so that'll be fine. Okay. So that should be cool. We'll leave that the way it is. Let me save. And then we'll go and adjust and add our last couple things in here, which is like a little asteroid belt. Now we could do an asteroid belt the same way we did these guys, but we don't need to create pieces of geometry way back here. Okay, we can just fake it out there. So I'm going to create a new emitter, and it'll be a volume. And this one will be called asteroid belt. And for this piece of geometry shape, I'm going to pick torus. Okay, and you can see how big I'm scaling the torus up. I'm going to lower that section radius. Oops. And gradually scale it. There we go. And then away from center is off, around axis is on. And see, a long axis is also on. Okay, I'm going to set the around axis to 0.1 and the long axis to 1. That way I have a little bit more going around than the other way. Okay. Now the unfortunate thing is that there's no way to kind of like cut this in half, as far as I want most of my particles there, but that'll be fine. Okay. So I need sufficient particles to see this, so I'm just going to set my rate to 100 and hit play. And we're not really seeing anything happen because they're so tiny, right? So I'm going to go to my particle shape, asteroid belt particles, and under the points, I'll change this to sprites. Okay, current render type, I'll make the sprites bigger. I'll rewind it, play again, and I may even have to go to my camera and increase my far clipping plane. There we go. And now you can see there they are. Alright, so if I hit play, you can see them coming up. I'm going to go and grab the emitter, and let's say increase these numbers a little bit. Oh, section radius is set to 0. That's why it was only emitting in that small little streak. There we go. That should be good. Let's play. And now we can see a bunch of little guys kind of floating in here. Okay. Now, eventually, what we're going to do is just cut it off so that we only have. Come on. We only have these things starting right at the beginning and never getting born. They're just automatically there. So I'm going to go to my material, because I want to get a picture of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s that we created. I want to put those on each one of these. So I'm going to go to Lambert, assign a new favorite material, Lambert. And on this Lambert 3, which is going to be the asteroid belt Lambert, I'm going to click on the color mapper, go to my file, and under here I'm going to click on number 1. Okay. So if I hit 6, you'll see that all of these have the number 1 attached to them. Okay. If I come down here to use image sequence, you'll see that it's actually going to try to cycle through this image sequence. Okay. I'm going to right click, I'm just going to delete the expression. And then rewind it, hit play, and you'll see that we have nothing showing up here. The particles are still there, but their texture is gone, okay? Because it just doesn't know what to do at this point. And what does it say? Yeah. Right. So what I need to do is I need to begin using this other thing under particles. There's a sprite wizard. Okay, so that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to grab these guys. I'm going to go to particles, sprite wizard, and it automatically will load it in. So there's my if base image. My max is 5. Okay, because I have file 1 through file 5. I hit create. No animation, use a single image for each particle. Perfect. Use the first image in the sequence. Use a random number. And then apply. Okay. And if we can zoom in, alright, let's see why that's not working. That should be working. Okay, so the issue was that in my source images, I wanted to have a name dot number. So I just renamed these things to be sprite.1.if, sprite.2.if, sprite.3.if. Went back to I reloaded the number 1 here. You'll see that it gives us like, the less than f greater than sign. This is still connected here. It adds this expression still in there. But now when I hit play, you'll see that the particles are all coming up with the different picture on each one of these. Okay, so that's awesome. That's exactly what we wanted. And the cool thing is that they're always going to be facing the camera, so regardless of our position, they're always facing us. So we don't have to worry about hitting the side of one of those planes. So the next step is to kind of customize what they look like. So I'm going to grab the item there, go to my asteroid belt, and I can obviously adjust the scale 30 and 30 or 80 and 80, and I can see them a lot bigger, but now they're all the same size. And if I'm going to eventually import pictures of meteors or rocks or whatever, and I'm going to have that flying through there, I don't want that to happen. Also, there's a lifespan on here. I want to get rid of that. Okay, so let's go first up to the lifespan and just say live forever. We'll just make sure our expression still works. That didn't work. It probably won't let me do live forever, so I'll just set it to something ridiculous like 500. Okay, that's 500 seconds. Okay, so that's pretty good right there. I like the way that's looking. Let's come down to our sprites, come down to the per particle array, and you'll see that we have the sprite number, that sprite wizard up here, right there, goes through and it creates several things right here, expressions and whatever else. We'll just leave those. I'm going to go down to the general area, and under particle, I'm going to add the sprite stuff. So I'm going to add sprite scale X pp, sprite scale Y pp, and sprite twist pp. And hit OK, and you'll see that we get the sprite twist, scale X, and scale Y. If they don't show up, just hit select, and typically it'll re-show up. Okay. So I'm going to right click on the twist, we'll do that first, and we'll do a creation expression. Okay, I'm going to come down to the bottom of all this other expression that's written here and just hit return a couple times, or I could just at the top hit return a couple times here and just start typing it there. Either way it works. Okay, so I'm going to say sprite twist pp equals a random number between 0 and 360. Okay, so this should give them each a random rotation. I hit edit, I close it, I rewind it, I hit play, and you'll see that they all come in with this random rotation on them, and that's exactly what we want to happen for each of those. Now I do want to have a slight rotation to them. They're all kind of moving in the same direction, so I think rotating in the same direction is probably going to be fine. So I'm going to go to my sprite twist runtime expression and do the same thing, a couple enters, sprite twist pp equals sprite twist pp plus, let's say, 1 degree. Okay, so now we rewind it, we hit play, and you'll see that they're all rotating. Now what's kind of boring about this is that they're all rotating in the exact same fashion. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to create a variable where I can randomize that. Okay, so under the add general dynamic attributes, I'm going to hit general, make a new one, and call this random rotation per particle array. Hit OK. Under random rotation, I'm going to do a creation expression. And in here, I'm just going to say random rotation equals a random value between 0 and 4. Okay. Hit edit, hit close, go back to my sprite twist runtime expression, and instead of doing it +1, I'm going to do it plus the random rotation. Okay, so just so you can see what that expression looks like, let me pull these over here. And let me get the other one so you can see that. Creation expression. Okay, so here's our two creation expressions. We're setting the twist to be a random number between 0 and 360. That way we get the full rotation. And then we're giving the random rotation a value of 0 to 4. So basically what we're going to do is add any number between 0 and 4 to each one of those consistently over time. Okay, so edit, close, rewind, play. And now you'll see that some of these are going to rotate very slowly and some of these are going to rotate very quickly. Okay, so 4 is probably too aggressive of a number. Let me go back to that random rotation and we'll set this to 1. Okay, that should be good. Okay, and some are, again, rotating faster, some are rotating slower. We could also, if we wanted to, for other cases, I think this case we don't need it, is make the rotation negative, random number between -1 and 1. And then what's going to happen is some are going to rotate backwards, some are going to rotate forward. I think in this case it looks kind of weird, so I'm just going to leave it at 0 and 1. Okay, so now we have that rotation happening on there. The next step, we're going to go to the scale. So I'm going to go here and go to creation expression. And I'm going to say sprite scale ypp equals a random number between 0, not 0, it's at 80 right now, remember that. So 80 and 120. Okay, maybe even less than that, let's say 60 and 120. Okay, now that's the y. So I hit edit, I reset it, I hit play, and you'll see that there definitely some scaling happening in the y direction. Okay, not the x. We haven't done the x yet. So I'm just going to copy and paste that expression and just change that to x. And we'll see that we get a different effect happening here. You'll see that they still look like that there's more scaling in one direction than the other. This number 1 right here definitely looks like it's squished down. This number 1 right here is definitely stretched outward. Okay, what's happening is the y is getting one value and the x is getting a totally different value. Okay, so they're not maintaining that same proportion. Just to exaggerate that further, let me set this to 12 and 12. And then you'll really see how these are really stretched out or really squished down. And, you know, it looks odd. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set my scale xpp to equal the scale ypp. And what should happen now is that they should be uniform. Okay, different sizes, small ones, big ones. That's exactly what we want to happen, is just that mix. Okay. And if you look at this from above, obviously it's going to look kind of funny. But when we're here and we're looking at this thing happening, where are our missiles at? Oh, they already turned off. So we have our missiles kind of flying in here and hitting. Then we're going to have these asteroids in the background. Now that still might be too big. Let's go and scale these down a bit. So we'll take this and maybe make it 60 as our highest. Okay, so we'll reset it. Maybe even lower still. I want to be able to see. I just want to make sure that I'm not kind of blowing the scale out of proportion. Like these things back here are just enormous. Okay, our camera angle when we render this out is going to be something like that. Okay, and that'll look pretty cool once we're done. All right. All right, so I think we're good with that. Okay, and I'm just going to save this as instancing setup done, initial setup done. Okay, so that's pretty good the way we have it now. And so the next step in this is just to go through and just customize what all this stuff looks like. So I can go here to this cone shape and actually model a little rocket. Then all I have to do is go to my instancer. See, these ones are asteroids. Go to our instancer for the rocket and just load in that new shape. So when I showed you create a sphere, model it, add selection, there we go. So you're just going to model a little rocket of what you want that rocket that's shooting at the planet to look like. And there we go there. And then we can go into Photoshop and we can edit our shapes. So I can make a brand new texture. I can keep it at 256. I can make it lower if I see that I'm like really slowing my station down. Okay, or I can make it higher if I'm just not getting enough detail in those rock pictures. Okay, 256 should be sufficient. We can use Google and find pictures of asteroids, rocks. Here's a good one. It's on Wikipedia, so it's like free for use. Paste it in there. I can just resize it. Okay, and I'm just going to size the rock up as big as I can get it in here. Okay, now you'll see that there's a bunch of black, so I'm going to go to select color range, click on the black here, and just adjust this to about there, and then I can delete that information, and then oops, I'm also going to go to my layers and just delete this background layer. Okay, now instead of saving this as an if I save it as a ping, asteroid.1.ping, and I come back to Maya, all I have to do is just grab these. There's my Lambert. And reload it, and you'll see that now all the ones that had the number 1 in it, I went too far, will now have that ping on there. Okay, and you'll also notice that because we took the background out and we deleted it, that they actually have transparency, so I can see straight through this into those other ones, and that's what we want to happen. Okay, so just go and grab 5 images of cool meteors. Here's a cool one. And I'll just hide that, make a new layer, scale it down, and give it some rotation here. Now, is the lighting going to match? No, the lighting is not going to match, but it's so far away, it should be fine the way it's set up. Okay. Oops. I'll go to select color range again. That's fine. I'll let it select that, and then I can just go through and just subtract that area. There we go. And then again, I'll save as a ping. Asteroid number 2. Back to Maya, reload, and now we have asteroid number 2 loaded inside here along with asteroid number 1. And you'll see that it looks like they're actually like floating around space. Now if the shadow issue does become a problem, then we just need to create more of a generic asteroid without any shading to it. Just something that's very like this, okay, very blah. It does have lighting on it, but I could soften that lighting so it looks less contrasted. Something like that could work. Something like this could work. Okay. The goal is that eventually we're going to render these out in passes, so that whole back area will be fuzzed anyway. Okay, so we'll be able to see this kind of stuff. All right. So that's where we're going to leave this lecture, is right here. Your next stages are just to build the rocket ship that you want to have come out of here. You can customize these rocks if you want to customize those rocks. You can customize the shapes of those, obviously adding those there. Okay, and then the next lecture we'll go through actually just finishing it up, getting these things to look the way we want them to look, and to render it out with our layers, and then we'll be done with this one. All right, so there we go.